My HOA president thought she was stealing my land. Instead, she just built me $115,000 worth of free home improvements. It started when Delilah Thornfield showed up with a sledgehammer crew, pointing at the oak fence my dying wife and I built together. "Tear it down," she commanded. "Public lake access for everyone." But this public path she was carving through my property led straight to her private boat dock. The chainsaw's roar drowned out my protests as 15 years of memories became wood chips. The acrid smell of sawdust mixed with diesel fumes, but what really made me sick was watching her destroy the last thing Sarah and I created together. What would you do if someone with fake authority demolished your most precious memories for their personal convenience? Tell me where you're watching from, and share the most outrageous HOA nightmare you've experienced. Here's what Delilah didn't know. I'd spent 30 years as a property surveyor. The research I did that night revealed she was building her dream pathway on the wrong side of the property line. She was about to hand me the most expensive gift any neighbor has ever given. Subscribe to HOA Stories for the sweetest revenge in real estate history. Let me back up and tell you how this war started. I'm Garrett Whitman, 58-year-old retired property surveyor living in the lakefront cabin my parents left me. After losing my wife Sarah to cancer 3 years ago, this place became my lifeline. Sarah and I built that oak fence during her final summer. She was too weak for heavy lifting, but insisted on holding every board while I hammered. "Something permanent," she whispered, running her fingers along the wood. "So part of us stays here forever." Then Delilah Thornfield bought the mansion across the street. Picture a 45-year-old real estate attorney with dead shark eyes and a smile that could freeze hell. Designer everything, perfectly styled hair, and the personality of a parking meter. Her glass palace cost more than most people's retirement funds, but it had one fatal flaw: no direct lake access. Meanwhile, my humble cabin sat right on the water with a private dock. Within 2 months of moving in, Delilah got herself elected HOA president. Suddenly, we had new rules every week. No RVs in driveways, no flower gardens over 18 inches, no holiday decorations past January 2nd. She was turning our quiet neighborhood into suburban Alcatraz. The smell of her entitlement was stronger than her designer perfume. Then came the letter that started everything. Cream paper, official letterhead dripping with fake politeness. "Mr. Whitman, your fence violates new height restrictions. Reduced to 4 feet immediately or face $500 weekly fines, non-negotiable. D. Thornfield, HOA president." I called her that afternoon. "Mrs. Thornfield, this fence has been here 15 years with full HOA approval." Her voice went saccharine sweet. "Old rules don't matter, sweetie, we're modernizing. Grandfather clauses are so yesterday." "Grandfather clauses don't apply?" My blood pressure spiked. "That's not how property law works." "It's how my HOA works. 30 days to comply or we start seizing assets. Have a blessed day." She hung up like she'd just ordered a latte. But here's where it gets interesting. The next morning, I'm having coffee on my deck when I see Delilah standing at her bedroom window, staring directly at my dock through binoculars. Not casual glancing, full-on surveillance mode. When she spotted me watching her watch me, she quickly pulled the curtains shut. That's when I realized this wasn't about fence height violations or community standards. This was about my waterfront access, and she wanted it. 2 days later, I got home from grocery shopping to find orange spray paint marking my entire fence line. Not just the fence, they'd marked my rose bushes, my mailbox, even Sarah's memorial bench. The note taped to my door was brief. "Surveying for compliance modifications. Work begins Monday. Thornfield Construction Management." I stood there, holding that note, breathing in the diesel fumes still hanging in the air from their equipment, and something clicked into place. Delilah wasn't just some pushy HOA president. She was running a con, and I was her mark. She thought she was dealing with a grieving widower who'd roll over and play dead. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with someone who'd spent 30 years making sure people knew exactly where their property lines were drawn. That evening, I pulled out my surveying equipment for the first time since retirement. If Delilah wanted to play property games, I was about to show her what a professional looked like. The war was officially on. Monday morning hit like a sledgehammer at 7 a.m. Diesel engines roared as Delilah directed her crew like a suburban dictator. "Tear it all down," she commanded. "Every board goes." The acrid smell of chainsaw exhaust mixed with sawdust turned my coffee bitter. But as I watched them work, my surveyor brain noticed something crucial. This wasn't just demolition. They were building something massive: professional stone pathway, decorative lighting, landscape borders. This was at least $85,000 worth of construction. "What exactly are you building?" I called from my deck. Delilah spun around with that venomous smile. "Public lake access, sweetie. Community property for everyone." "Community property? On my land?" She waved an official folder. "Actually, this land was never really yours. Adverse possession laws. We've been using this area for years." She was claiming legal ownership of my property through fake adverse possession. But here's what made my blood freeze. Her pathway curved directly toward her mansion's back gate. This public access was her private highway to my waterfront. That night, I researched every document I owned. By 3 a.m., I'd found something beautiful. The next morning, I was ready with my counterattack. "Morning, Mrs. Thornfield. Impressive construction project." She looked wary. "Thank you. I'm glad you're accepting the community benefits." "Oh, I'm very interested. So interested that I documented every day I've used this exact area for the past 15 years. I held up a thick photo album. Gardening, fence maintenance, property inspections. Turns out adverse possession can't work when the owner actively uses their land. Her confident expression cracked. I also called the city planning office. Funny thing, no permits on file for this address. There must be. And here's the really interesting part. I filed a formal complaint about unauthorized construction. Inspector Johnson arrives at noon. The mask dropped completely. "You meddling bastard. Have a blessed day, Mrs. Thornfield." 3 hours later, Inspector Johnson examined the site with the enthusiasm of a man investigating tax fraud. "Ma'am, where are your permits?" Delilah fumbled frantically. "They're being processed." "Work stops immediately. This is clearly private property with no construction authorization." He slapped a bright orange stop work order on her equipment. "Everything off-site by 5 p.m. or face $500 daily fines." As Johnson drove away, Delilah glared at me with pure hatred. "This war isn't over." "No," I agreed, watching her crew pack up thousands of dollars in equipment, "but you just made a very expensive mistake." What she didn't know was that while she'd been playing amateur lawyer with fake adverse possession claims, I'd been conducting real property research that would soon make this the costliest construction project in neighborhood history. Her little land grab was about to become my biggest payday. You'd think a stop work order would humble most people, but Delilah Thornfield was a special breed of entitled that viewed setbacks as personal warfare, requiring nuclear response. 2 days later, I found a certified letter taped to my door like a legal ransom note. Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance. 7 p.m. tonight. The agenda was simple: motion to fine Garrett Whitman $2,000 for obstruction of community projects. She was calling an emergency meeting to punish me for reporting her crimes. The audacity was breathtaking. That evening, I walked into the community center to find Delilah had stacked the deck. 8 residents total, the 4 supporters clustered near the front, 3 neutrals in the middle, and me sitting alone, like I was on trial. "We're here to address Mr. Whitman's deliberate sabotage of our lake access project," Delilah announced with theatrical authority. Mrs. Patterson, our 82-year-old retired librarian, raised her hand. "Sabotage?" He reported illegal construction. That's called citizenship. Delilah's smile could freeze hell. "Mr. Whitman cost our community thousands in delays. His selfishness blocks progress for everyone." "Progress?" I stood slowly. "You mean stealing my property for your private walkway?" "It's community easement land," she snapped, then forced sweetness back into her voice. "The HOA has every right to claim unused areas." Time for my first surprise. I pulled out my phone and hit play. "Actually, this land was never really yours. Adverse possession laws. We've been using this area for years." Her own voice filled the room. Crystal clear, unmistakably damning. "A legal recording," she shrieked. "Michigan is a one-party consent state," I replied calmly. "Perfectly legal to record my own conversations." The room went dead silent. Even her supporters looked uncomfortable. But Delilah wasn't finished. "Regardless, Mr. Whitman's actions require consequences. I motioned for $2,000 in fines and foreclosure proceedings if unpaid within 30 days. Mrs. Patterson exploded. "Foreclosure? Over-reporting illegal construction? Have you lost your mind? I've consulted with my attorney, Delilah waved a legal document. Everything is legitimate. That's when I noticed the letterhead, Thornfield and Associates. She was her own lawyer. Mrs. Thornfield, you're providing legal counsel to the HOA while serving as its president? I'm saving the community money with my expertise. That's called conflict of interest, grounds for removal and ethics violations. Her confidence cracked visibly. Winston Rodriguez, our neighborhood handyman, cleared his throat. If she's been planning this for months, and she's president, and she's the lawyer, who's been paying for all this legal advice she's giving herself? Brilliant question. I watched Delilah's brains scramble for an answer that wouldn't incriminate her. The HOA compensates for services rendered, she stammered. How much? Mrs. Patterson demanded. Attorney jumping privilege. Winston laughed. Lady, you can't have privilege with yourself. That's like performing surgery on your own appendix. But here's where Delilah made her fatal mistake. Instead of retreating, she went nuclear. Fine. I've worked for free to help this ungrateful community. Mr. Whitman's obstruction cost us $15,000 in delays. He pays, or we lien his property. I smiled and placed a folder on the table. Actually, let's talk about that $15,000. I requested our HOA financial records today, public information available to any homeowner. Her face went ghost white. Interesting payments to Thornfield Construction Management. But here's the really fascinating part. I opened the folder dramatically. According to state business records, Thornfield Construction Management was incorporated 3 weeks after you became HOA president. You literally created a company to bill us. The room erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. But wait, it gets better. Your construction company has been billing our HOA for consultation fees for 6 months, before any construction even started. Delilah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You've been embezzling from the community while planning to steal my land? That's not just conflict of interest, that's fraud. The silence was deafening. Even her supporters were staring at her with disgust. Delilah Thornfield had just been exposed as a common criminal in front of the entire neighborhood. You could have heard a pin drop in that community center. Delilah sat frozen, probably calculating her felony count. But if you think getting caught embezzling would make her surrender, you don't know sociopaths like Delilah Thornfield. 3 days later, she went nuclear. I was trimming Sarah's roses when Winston jogged over looking like he'd seen a ghost. Garrett, you need to see this. He handed me a flyer distributed to every house in the neighborhood. Consecrated neighbors meeting, addressing the mental health crisis on Willowbrook Lane. My blood turned to ice as I read. Recent erratic behavior by Garrett Whitman has raised serious safety concerns. Community intervention may be necessary to address grief-induced instability, endangering property values, and neighborhood harmony. She was weaponizing my grief, in writing, to everyone I knew. There's more, Winston said grimly. She's telling people you've been drinking heavily, talking to yourself, screaming at imaginary intruders, classic signs of psychological breakdown. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson called in tears. Garrett, Adult Protective Services came asking about your welfare. I told them you're fine, but they said they'd received multiple concerned calls about your mental state. But Delilah's masterstroke came the next morning. I found a for sale sign planted in my yard without my permission. I called the number immediately. Pinnacle Realty, this is Sandra. Why is there a sale sign in my yard without authorization? Mr. Whitman? Your HOA president said you decided to sell due to personal circumstances. We understood it was urgent. Remove it immediately. I never authorized this. Within hours, 6 real estate vultures had called, offering 60% of market value for my distressed property. Word was spreading that I was desperate to sell. That evening, Delilah hosted her intervention meeting at her mansion. Winston went as my spy and returned shaking his head. She's diabolical, Garrett. Had tissues ready, spoke in worried tones about you struggling with Sarah's loss, made herself look like a saint trying to help a disturbed neighbor. How many bought it? Too many. She's convinced them the property dispute is you lashing out because you can't handle living in your shared memories. The psychological warfare was brilliant. She'd weaponized my love for Sarah against me. But here's where Delilah made her fatal error. She assumed I was just a grieving widower with no resources. What she didn't know was that Sarah had been a forensic accountant before cancer took her. She'd taught me how to trace financial fraud. While Delilah was playing mind games, I'd been following the money trail she'd left behind, and what I'd discovered was about to destroy her completely. That night, I made 3 calls. Attorney Marcus Webb, private investigator Janet Kim, and Channel 7's investigative reporter David Chin, who specialized in suburban corruption. The next morning, I showed up at Delilah's door at 8 a.m. with a manila envelope and my biggest smile. "Morning, Delilah. Thanks for your concern about my mental health. So touching." He opened cautiously, probably expecting another episode. I had my doctor write a fitness letter. Dr. Morrison says I'm sharp as a tack. He also mentioned that false APS reports constitute criminal harassment. Fascinating. I handed her the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly. "Oh, and about that real estate fraud? My attorney found impersonating property owners quite illegal, but here's the really exciting news. Channel 7 wants to interview me about HOA corruption." The color drained from her face like water from a broken dam. They're particularly interested in HOA presidents who embezzle funds while calling their victims mentally unstable. The irony is just delicious. She tried to slam the door. "The interview airs Friday. You might want to lawyer up. Have a blessed day." As I walked away, I heard frantic phone calls starting behind her door. Delilah Thornfield was about to discover that declaring psychological warfare on a man who'd learned financial forensics from the best was the biggest mistake of her entitled life. Game on. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Sarah passed. I opened her home office door. For 3 years, I'd kept that room exactly as she'd left it. Forensic accounting textbooks lined the shelves. Her computer hummed quietly in sleep mode. The faint scent of lavender hand lotion still lingered where she'd spent countless hours catching financial criminals for the FBI. "Okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "Time to catch another one." I fired up her analysis software and started digging into Delilah's financial history. What I found in the first hour made my coffee go cold. Thornfield Construction Management had been incorporated and dissolved 4 times in 6 years. Always the same pattern. Move to upscale neighborhood, get elected HOA president, create community improvements that mysteriously benefited her property, then vanish when residents got suspicious. But here's where my surveyor background paid off. I pulled the original 1987 plat maps, the ones I'd personally helped survey as a junior engineer 35 years ago. My hands started shaking as I compared them to current county records. Someone had digitally altered the property boundaries in the database. According to current records, my property ended 15 feet short of the lake. According to the original survey that I'd measured myself, my land extended to the high water mark. I pulled up Google Earth historical images dating back to 2005. There they were, the original stone property markers I'd personally installed, clearly visible in satellite photos, exactly where the 1987 survey placed them. But the real eureka moment came when I cross-referenced tax records. For 35 years, the county had been assessing and taxing that 15-foot waterfront strip as my property. Every tax bill, every assessment, every legal description confirmed my ownership of the exact area where Delilah had built her pathway. The beautiful irony hit me like a lightning bolt. Delilah hadn't just trespassed on my property to build her shortcut. She'd spent $85,000 of her own money improving land that legally belonged to me, while I'd been paying taxes on it for decades. Under Michigan law, any improvements made to your property, even by someone who thinks they own it, become your property permanently. But the bombshell that made me burst out laughing in that quiet office was yet to come. I pulled Delilah's property deed and compared it to the tax assessor's maps. Her mansion, her beautiful glass palace that she was so proud of, it was built 20 feet closer to the road than the deed specified. Part of her house was on community land that she'd been claiming belonged to the same woman who'd accused me of property violations had built her own home partially on land she didn't own. I sat back in Sarah's chair, feeling her presence like a warm embrace. She'd always said criminals defeat themselves. You just have to follow the evidence. "Thanks, sweetheart," I whispered. "You just helped me become the richest man on Willowbrook Lane." Tomorrow, I'd file a quiet title action claiming my full property boundaries, but tonight, I savored the delicious irony. Delilah Thornfield had spent 3 months and $85,000 building me the most spectacular lakefront improvement imaginable, while simultaneously exposing her own illegal construction. The predator had just become the prey, and she was about to pay for every square foot. Armed with Sarah's bombshell discoveries, I knew I had Delilah dead to rights, but 30 years of surveying had taught me that evidence without proper presentation is worthless. Time to build an airtight case. My first call went to Marcus Webb, the property attorney who'd handled Sarah's estate. Marcus was a courtroom predator who'd never lost a boundary dispute. "Garrett, this is legal dynamite," he said after reviewing my evidence. "Quiet title action, criminal fraud, elder abuse. She's looking at federal charges, but we do this surgically. One mistake and she lawyers up and disappears." Next, I called Janet Kim, private investigator and former Detroit police detective who specialized in suburban white-collar crime. "I know Delilah Thornfield," Janet said grimly. "She's pulled this con in 3 other Michigan cities. Infiltrate, embezzle, vanish. You caught her mid-scheme, which means she's desperate and dangerous." "Whole dangerous." Cornered fraudsters do crazy things. File false police reports, claim threats, sometimes even stage break-ins. Watch your back. The third call was to David Chen at Channel 7 News, who'd built his career exposing municipal corruption. "If your evidence is solid, this could be the biggest HOA fraud in state history, but I need video proof, multiple witnesses, and preferably her caught on tape. Can you deliver?" "Give me 2 weeks." But my most important ally came from an unexpected source, and she was pissed. Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door Thursday evening, clutching a manila envelope with white-knuckled hands. "Garrett, that woman approached me with an offer to buy my house, 20% below market, but she'd handle all the complicated paperwork for an old lady who doesn't understand modern real estate." The predatory pattern clicked. "What did you tell her?" And I'd think about it, but here's what really made my blood boil. She said property values were about to drop once certain undesirable elements were removed from the neighborhood. She was threatening the community while trying to buy properties cheap. Classic predatory real estate fraud. "Mrs. Patterson, would you wear a recording device next time she calls?" Her eyes gleamed with righteous fury. "Honey, I've been waiting 82 years for someone to underestimate me. Let's destroy this predator." Over the next week, our evidence mountain grew. Janet traced $47,000 in fraudulent expenses. Marcus confirmed my property included not just the pathway, but Delilah's precious boat dock. David discovered she'd fled Alabama after similar schemes. But the smoking gun came when Mrs. Patterson's hidden recorder captured pure gold. "Listen, sweetie, this neighborhood's changing. Certain people are going to be removed, and property values will tank. I'm offering you a chance to escape before things get ugly. Cash sale, no inspections, close in 2 weeks." Delilah was simultaneously threatening property values and offering fire sale prices, textbook elder abuse. Friday afternoon, I called a war council in my kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the tension as Marcus, Janet, David, Mrs. Patterson, Winston, and 3 other neighbors gathered around evidence spread across my table like battle plans. "Here's where we stand," I began. "Delilah's embezzled $47,000, built $85,000 in improvements on my property, and is running an elder abuse real estate scam." Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. "Criminal fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and racketeering. She's looking at federal prison." "When do we strike?" Janet asked. I looked around at my neighbors, who'd become my army, each with their own score to settle with Delilah's tyranny. Tuesday, monthly HOA meeting. Full attendance, cameras rolling, legal papers ready to serve. "What if she runs?" Winston asked. I smiled, remembering Sarah's words about cornered criminals. "She won't run. Sociopaths can't resist the spotlight. She'll show up to defend herself, and we'll be waiting." The trap was set. In 4 days, Delilah Thornfield would walk into her own destruction, and I'd have front row seats to watch justice served ice cold. You know what they say about cornered animals? They bite. Delilah Thornfield was about to prove that in the most vicious way imaginable. Monday morning, sirens woke me up. 2 police cruisers sat in my driveway, and Officer Martinez was walking toward my door looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Whitman, we received reports of threats against a neighbor. Mind if we come in?" My stomach dropped. "What kind of threats?" Mrs. Thornfield says you've been calling her at all hours, making threatening statements about revenge and making her pay. She's filing for a restraining order. I almost laughed at the audacity. Officer, I haven't called her once. My attorney specifically told me to avoid contact. She provided these. He handed me screenshots of text messages, allegedly from my phone, sent at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., containing increasingly hostile language about property disputes. The messages were masterfully crafted, exactly what an angry, grieving widower might send during sleepless nights, except I'd been asleep with my phone charging in the kitchen. Those are fake. I can prove my phone location with digital forensics. Martinez looked uncomfortable. Sir, we take all threats seriously. Mrs. Thornfield seems genuinely frightened. Then came the Oscar Wathy performance. Delilah appeared at my gate with no makeup, disheveled hair, clutching tissues like a terrorized victim. Officer Martinez, thank you for coming, she said in a trembling voice. I'm so scared. Ever since I had to report his violations, he's been unstable. She'd transformed from imperious HOA dictator to vulnerable victim in 12 hours. Pure theater. After the police left, I called Marcus immediately. They're spoofed messages, Marcus. I believe you, but she's building a harassment case to discredit you before tomorrow's meeting. If she gets a restraining order, anything you say becomes vindictive harassment. But Delilah's masterstroke was yet to come. That afternoon, Winston came running over, face flushed with fury. Garrett, you need to see what's happening at the community center. We found Delilah holding an impromptu safety meeting in the parking lot with 15 residents, mostly elderly women. I know you have questions about tonight's meeting, she said in that sickeningly maternal voice, but I want you to know we've taken precautions. Mr. Whitman has been making threats and we have police documentation of his deteriorating mental state. She was poisoning the jury pool, preparing them to dismiss anything I said as delusional rambling. Sometimes grief affects people dangerously, she continued. We can't let one person's breakdown endanger our community. What Delilah didn't realize was that Janet Kim, my private investigator, was recording everything from across the street with a telephoto lens and directional microphone, professional surveillance equipment that would hold up in court. But the real bombshell came an hour before the meeting. Mr. Whitman? Detective Morrison, County Fraud Division. We've received reports that you've been tampering with property records and filing false boundary claims. The timing was surgical precision. Detective, I haven't filed anything false. Sir, we need you to come in for questioning. Tonight. She was trying to get me arrested an hour before the meeting that would expose her crimes. Who filed this complaint? I can't reveal that, but they seemed very concerned about elderly residents being defrauded by fake property claims. Delilah had accused me of her own crimes. The irony was breathtaking. But here's where her desperation revealed a fatal flaw. I called Marcus immediately. She's trying to have me arrested before tonight's meeting. Actually, this is perfect, Marcus said, and I could hear him smiling. She just committed a felony, filing a false police report to interfere with legal proceedings. But more importantly, her complaint triggered an automatic investigation. How was that good? Because Detective Morrison will want to see all the evidence, including what we have on Delilah. She just opened a criminal investigation into herself. As I drove to the station with Marcus, I realized Delilah's fatal mistake. In her desperation to destroy me, she'd handed law enforcement a complete roadmap to her own crimes. The hunter had just walked into her own trap. The county sheriff's station smelled like stale coffee and shattered lies. Detective Morrison was a steel-armed woman who looked like she ate white-collar criminals for breakfast. Mr. Whitman, someone claims you've been altering property records and defrauding elderly neighbors. That's serious felony territory. I placed my evidence folder on her desk. Detective, I think you'll find the real fraud considerably more entertaining. For the next hour, we laid out Delilah's criminal empire. Morrison's expression darkened with each document. This Thornfield woman filed the complaint against you? The same woman who's embezzled $47,000 while calling me mentally unstable. Morrison's smile could cut glass. Mr. Whitman, Mrs. Thornfield and I need to have a chat. Tonight. Meanwhile, Delilah was staging her masterpiece. The community center had been transformed into a kangaroo court with Delilah as supreme judge. Chairs arranged in a semicircle facing her table, complete with hired court reporter and 2 intimidating security guards flanking the entrance. The stench of her desperation overpowered her designer perfume. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, as residents filed in, "tonight we address the harassment that has terrorized our community. Mr. Whitman's deteriorating mental state has forced protective measures." But Delilah's theatrical moment shattered when Detective Morrison walked in behind me, badge gleaming, followed by Janet Kim with surveillance equipment and David Chen's Channel 7 crew. Her face went whiter than fresh snow. "Mrs. Thornfield, I need to discuss the complaint you filed this evening." "Of course, Detective. As you can see, Mr. Whitman has brought quite an intimidating—" "Actually, ma'am, your complaint triggered a fraud investigation. Into you." The room went tomb silent. "I'm sorry, what?" Delilah's composure cracked like thin ice. "Filing false reports is a felony, but your accusations led us to examine Mr. Whitman's evidence about your embezzlement and property fraud." That's when Winston Rodriguez stood up, holding his phone. "Detective, I've got something even better. I've been Delilah's construction foreman for 3 months. She had me build that pathway knowing it was on Garrett's property. Said we'd claim adverse possession later. I recorded everything." The betrayal hit Delilah like a physical blow. Her own hired muscle had been documenting her crimes. "Winston, you lying piece—" "Ma'am, please control yourself," Morrison warned. But Delilah went full meltdown mode. "This is a conspiracy. They're all working together to frame me." She wheeled on the assembled residents with the fury of a cornered animal. "Don't you see? Whitman bribed them all. He's the real criminal here." David Chen stepped forward with his microphone. "Mrs. Thornfield, Channel 7 has confirmed similar schemes in Alabama, Tennessee, and Ohio. Same pattern, same company names. Comment? Those were legitimate businesses. And the fake text messages sent from spoofed numbers to frame Mr. Whitman?" Her eyes went wide. She hadn't expected us to trace those. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We have digital forensics proving the messages originated from your IP address, along with the fake police report you filed tonight." Each revelation drove her deeper into panic. The professional con artist was becoming an amateur liar. But her final gambit was pure desperation. She turned to the elderly residents she'd been targeting. "Mrs. Patterson, you know I've only tried to help. These people are framing me because I discovered their corruption." Mrs. Patterson's response was devastating. "Honey, the only thing you discovered was how to steal houses from old ladies while calling it community service." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs as residents realized the scope of her manipulation. Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, filing false police reports, and elder abuse." As the handcuffs clicked, Delilah made one last desperate threat. "This isn't over, Whitman. I'll sue you for everything. I'll destroy—" "Ma'am," Morrison said calmly, "you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." As they led the neighborhood's former dictator away in handcuffs, the community center buzzed with shocked relief and nervous laughter. Justice had arrived, wearing a badge and speaking in legalese. But tomorrow would bring the real payoff, when I officially claimed ownership of $85,000 worth of improvements that Delilah had so thoughtfully built on my property. The next morning dawned like Judgment Day. I was enjoying coffee on my deck when Marcus called with news that made me nearly spit out my drink. Delilah made bail and is calling an emergency meeting to expose the conspiracy against her, noon today. She's still fighting after being arrested on live TV? Sociopaths never surrender. She thinks she can still con her way out of this. By 11:30, the community center looked like a federal crime scene. Channel 7's truck dominated the parking lot, with David Chen preparing for live broadcast. 2 additional news crews had arrived, along with county officials, FBI agents in suits, and what appeared to be half of Michigan. The air crackled with the electricity of impending justice. Inside, Delilah had somehow convinced the interim board to let her make one final statement. She sat regally at the head table in a crisp business suit, projecting wounded professionalism while her eyes darted around like a cornered predator. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice steady but strained, "I stand before you as the victim of an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by Mr. Whitman and his accomplices." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Facing federal charges, she was still playing offense. The so-called evidence has been fabricated using Mr. Whitman's government connections. Last night's arrest resulted from perjured testimony and falsified documents designed to steal my property. Mrs. Patterson shot up like a rocket. Delilah, we all heard the recordings where you confessed. Digital manipulation. They've created an elaborate frame job to destroy an innocent woman. That's when Detective Morrison entered with an FBI agent and a folder thick enough to stop bullets. With Thornfield, perfect timing. You're addressing exactly the people who need to hear this. Delilah's confidence flickered. Detective, I trust your investigation revealed the truth about this conspiracy? Morrison's smile was razor sharp. Oh, we uncovered quite a bit of truth, starting with your real identity. The room went cemetery quiet. My real identity? What are you talking about? Delilah Thornfield doesn't exist. Your real name is Donna Marie Thompson. You've been using forged documents for 6 years. The mic drop moment. Morrison opened her folder dramatically. You're wanted by the FBI in 7 states for serial HOA fraud totaling $2.3 million. You're number 847 on the Bureau's white-collar crime most wanted list. The revelation detonated like a bomb. Gasps, shouts, and the sound of phones frantically recording filled the air. That's impossible, Delilah shrieked. I am Delilah Thornfield. We found your real driver's license in a bedroom safe, along with $127,000 in cash, multiple fake IDs, and detailed surveillance photos of retirement communities in Colorado and Arizona. She was a professional predator who had been planning her next hunting grounds. David Chen thrust his microphone forward. Miss Thompson, any comment on your appearance on the FBI's most wanted list? I'm not, you're all conspiring. But the courtroom theater wasn't finished. I stood up with my own bombshell. Since we're sharing revelations, I have one for the community. I approached the front with surveyor documents. The $85,000 pathway that Donna built on my property? Under Michigan law, all improvements made on someone else's land transfer to the property owner. The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Marcus stepped forward with legal documents. Mr. Whitman now legally owns premium stonework, professional lighting, and landscape design, all constructed at Ms. Thompson's expense. The cosmic justice was so perfect it felt orchestrated by the universe itself. Additionally, HOA insurance will reimburse all embezzled funds. Ms. Thompson's assets, including her mansion, will be liquidated to pay restitution to her victims across multiple states. Donna sat frozen, watching her criminal empire collapse in real time. The FBI agent approached with federal handcuffs. Donna Marie Thompson, you're under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate criminal enterprise. As the metal clicked around her wrists, she finally spoke truth. I would have gotten away with it if that damn surveyor hadn't kept 30-year-old records. I leaned forward as they led her past. Ma'am, never try to con someone who's spent his career making sure people know exactly where they stand. The community center exploded in thunderous applause as America's most wanted HOA president was led away to federal prison. Sweet justice had been served with a $85,000 garnish, and it tasted absolutely perfect. 6 months later, I'm watching sunrise paint the lake gold while sipping coffee from Sarah's favorite mug. The view is spectacular thanks to the $85,000 worth of professional stonework that the FBI's former most wanted HOA president so thoughtfully built on my property. The legal aftermath was swift and beautiful. Donna Marie Thompson got 8 years in federal prison. The FBI recovered $2.3 million she'd stolen from 7 states. Our community got every penny back, plus damages that funded some amazing improvements. Her mansion sold at auction for 60% of market value. Apparently, former fugitive residents tanks property values. The new owners threw a block party to meet everyone. The difference in neighborhood energy was like switching from a funeral to a wedding reception. Mrs. Patterson became our new HOA president, running on common sense and no more stupid rules. First act, eliminating Donna's ridiculous regulations. We can park RVs, plant tall gardens, and keep Christmas lights until March if we want. My stone pathway became the unofficial community hangout. Summer evenings, neighbors gather by the water, while kids skip stones and adults talk about normal things instead of property violations and legal threats. But the most meaningful change happened 3 months ago. I was trimming Sarah's roses when I realized I was humming actually happy instead of just surviving. That's when I knew it was time to honor Sarah properly. We launched the Sarah Whitman Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing forensic accounting and criminal justice. Funded by FBI restitution money, it's already supporting 8 students who will spend their careers catching fraudsters like Donna. Sarah always said the best revenge against corruption was training people to recognize it. Now her legacy fights crime for generations. The story went viral after David Chen's follow-up segment. I've consulted with residents from 15 states dealing with HOA abuse. Turns out surveying experience plus criminal justice knowledge makes a powerful fraud-fighting combination. My property value jumped $180,000 thanks to the professional improvements, but more importantly, I have a real community now. Monthly potlucks, shared gardens, annual lake cleanups that bring together 3 neighborhoods. 0 HOA violations in 6 months. Amazing what happens when you treat people like adults instead of criminals. Yesterday brought the best news yet. The state legislature is considering the Willowbrook Act, mandatory background checks for HOA candidates, and financial transparency requirements. Our nightmare might prevent future Donna Thompsons from targeting other communities. This morning, listening to children's laughter echo across the water as they play on Sarah's pathway, I know she'd love seeing her final project bring such joy. But here's what I really want you to remember. If you're facing HOA bullies, property theft, or neighbors drunk on petty power, document everything. Trust your instincts, and remember that communities fighting together are unstoppable forces. The woman who tried to steal my grief-soaked memories ended up giving me the most expensive gift in neighborhood history while building herself a pathway straight to federal prison. Sometimes justice isn't just served, it's served with a $85,000 garnish and a side of cosmic irony. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Your nightmare might help someone else spot the warning signs before they become the next victim. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of sweet revenge served ice cold. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win big, the bad guys get exactly what they deserve, and property lines matter more than anyone realizes. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate a widower with surveying skills and nothing left to lose.